morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning to all of you over the internet with us as well. It's always good to be here on a Sunday. Weather is a little bit warmer than it has been the last 2 days, so it's not bad. I know some people love the winter, so no complaints at all. And actually, cannot complain about this winter at all. But anyways, it's always good to be here again together, learn a little bit together, be inspired about this lecture today that we're going to be talking about the meaning of resurrection that our brother Rafael is going to be bringing to us. But as always, before we start our lecture, we're going to do our initial prayer and our initial reading, our friend Tiago.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The reading today is from the book Happy Life by Joana de Angelis, psychographed by Edivaldo Pereira Franco. Jesus said, "Let not your hearts be troubled," teaching that serenity and trust in God must be the motto of all who desire happiness. There is never a shortage of reasons for worry, which unsettles one's heart and life. Human existence is a chance to appreciate eternal values and inner enlightenment. If you trust God with your life and all your worries, everything will unfold naturally. Should a problem arise, serenity will take control and settle the matter properly. Therefore, do not let your heart or mind be troubled by misfortune. Jesus, our Master, our brother, our friend, thank you once more for the chance to be here, to learn, and to absorb through your messages and through the Spiritist messages, your lessons of eternal life to us. We ask humbly, protect and inspire our friend Rafael, and also help us and open our minds and our hearts to comprehend the lessons of today, so may one day we apply them in our lives. We ask you to bless us today. Thank you, and so be it. Rafael.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, those who are watching us through our live stream. So as always, I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to see you. And while Tiago was doing his prayer and his reading, I was thinking that sometimes we go through life, or sometimes I just driving back from work, and I'm thinking there's something missing. I had a very productive day. I had my victories, my projects, little things worked, but it's still not enough. It's still not enough, and that feeling, it stays with me. And I think, what is it that it's missing? What is it that I'm doing wrong? And then when I sit here, or when I see you guys, and when I'm here, have this opportunity to talk, everything falls into place. So then I see that that's what is missing. That's this thirst that we have for spiritual developing. Or we have to touch our spirits, and in our daily lives we forget to do that. We just forget this part of ourselves. It's so important. So that's why I'm always very thankful for the opportunity to be here, to learn with you, and to talk about what I've learned. So the topic today is resurrection, but I just don't want to talk about things that you guys already know, or things that we've all learned, especially if we have a Catholic education. I want to go a little deeper. And I'm going to start by the most recent findings in anthropology, which is still obeys the out of Africa model. So we always everything started in Africa. right? So we developed that. So that's where the most advanced ape, or the Australopithecus, developed, and then developing something, something else, something else, something else, something else. Then we reached the Homo Habilis. So it's the first time that was really an hominid. And the Homo habilis was different than the others because he could stand straight, not just stand straight, but he had less fur, it has less hair in his body, and he could walk great distances. So he came out of Africa. And then several species of Homo sapiens, no, sorry, not Homo sapiens, several species of men appeared all around Europe. So we had Homo sapiens, we had the Homo neanderthalensis, we had another one that I forgot the name, the man of Java. And why am I talking about this? Because from all those species, only one is here today. Only one, Homo sapiens, us. So what was the difference between all those? So when the scientists, they studied the sightings or the caves where all these primitive men used to live, we see that the Neanderthal man, or Homo neanderthalensis, they lived in very tight families, like 10, 13 people, and they were not very good in relate to other families. So there wasn't a good relationship between families. So there was not a society. You see the technology, so they had their stone tools, and then over the years, the years pass by, and you find in different sightings the same stone, the same technology. It doesn't change much. And then when you go to Homo sapiens, you see that it's 150 people living together right from the beginning. And the technology changed a lot from the interaction between the society, from the interaction between us. So there are always problems, of course. There's always problems, always bickering between people. But we always preferred to stay together. And that is what made us the dominant species today. And also that created, we brought forward an innate feeling, an innate necessity that we have, that is to connect to our spiritual side. So we always had that since the beginning, and we start joining groups, and that start what we call religion. So since from the very beginning, we can see from the drawings in the walls of the cave, that since the beginning we had religion, and that was a very great bonding experience. So we were bonding on that. And throughout the years, we saw the spiritual connection with through our own spiritual maturity. So we had rituals, we had symbols, we had devices that helped us to understand what we couldn't. And as we matured, as our technology, our science developed, we start leaving behind those devices, those symbols, and we start seeing only the concept in itself. So religion, through this process, it stops being extraordinary and external, and it starts being ordinary, or it's something that is part of life, something that we see in everything. So we see God everywhere and everything that's happening, and that's natural. It's not extraordinary, it's natural. And then we start seeing that we don't need all those rituals and symbols, and we start bringing religion inside. So it starts becoming an internal religion. So our temple is not outside anymore, it's inside. We're still not completely there anymore, but that's the path that we are going. So one of these devices that we have been using for a long time is resurrection. So my plan today is to cover some of the meanings, some of the ancient meanings of resurrection, and then jump forward to the meaning that we understand today about resurrection. So then we can understand why we still read and why we still have in our traditions this word, and why we still have some groups that still explain things using this uh, ancient concept of resurrection. So I'm going to start. Of course, Western culture is heavily based on the Bible. Right? So the Bible is the most famous book throughout our history. It has been. So then, if you see there in other cultures, the concept of resurrection appears every now and then. So it's spread all over the world. But I have to focus into something because we cannot study everything. So then I'm going to start from the culture that we learn from the Bible. So in this picture here, we see Elijah, which is a very famous prophet from the Old Testament. He lived around the 9th century BC. And then we have on the other side Jesus and the resurrection of Lazarus. It's also a very famous occurrence that we see in the Gospel of Luke, Matthew. I'm not sure if we see in the other two, in Mark and in John, but I know for sure that this is in Matthew and Luke. So at this time, this is the first meaning of resurrection, the most common that we see today, which means coming back to life. So it's straightening again. So the word, the root of the word means being straightened. So you stand up, you come back to life. And before going deep into what those two are doing, we have to understand that when our world was being formed, there was already a plan. So the world was being formed, and there was a plan for that world. That was information. This plan, it's not this, nobody knows in its entirety, but we can read in the book On the Way to the Light from Emmanuel, that when the world was just in the beginning, it was coming out of the sun. So the matter sun that concentrated stars started rotating, and the matter that it dragged was concentrated into small spheres around it. And one of those spheres is the planet that we know today. So by that time, there was a meeting between the spirits. Those are the spiritual tradition tells us that those spirits, those pure spirits that are responsible for life in the universe, so they're responsible for life in the universe, they gathered and they decided how things would be with the life that it will develop in that small planet. This means us. So then it was decided that Jesus is part of this group, and he decided, okay, I'll go. At that time, more or less this time here, give or take 100 or 1,000 years. But before I go, I'm going to send missionaries, because when I go, I want the ground to be already ready for me to plant on. So I need to send missionaries first. So those missionaries that we call today prophets from the Bible, they came with, it's saying, they did not come here as to expiate. They come on a mission. So they are spirits ahead of their time. If they come on a mission to lead us, they can see further away. They can see much more than we can do. And they know much more than we do. So then these spirits, they have to come heavily supported. They had support, spiritual support. And in order to contact this support, they came with this or that mediumship. So Elijah is one of those spirits. He's a missionary. And he was a medium too. So how all that connects to resurrection? In that time, everything that happened to us that would make our body shut down or to make us faint or to go for any reason to become unconscious. We could understand very little of those situations. Almost everything was, okay, the person is dead. So if you have an organ failure, or if you have a virus or something that makes you very, very weak, and for some reason you faint, or your heart rate and your breathing slows down and you can barely feel the heart rate at that time, they didn't have any technique developed. So if the person is there is unconscious, you cannot feel anything. If you don't see the heart beating, if you don't feel the breathing, that person is dead. Which is completely different. Today we have CPR. So it's like a course that most of us have to take, depending on where we work. So it's like a technique of resurrection. So we are resurrecting that person. So today's, it's a course, it's a mandatory course. At that day, that was resurrection. That was a miracle. It means that we are a prophet, a saint, or a divine, whatever. But the difference is, Elijah and those prophets, they could see that person is not dead, or they could see, hear, or feel mediumship. That person is not dead. It's just sick. So they would go there and try to make that person better through pass or whatever technique they knew. So then, when Elijah, in this picture, he brought back a baby. So the baby was not dead, and we understand in a few minutes why, when you are really dead, you cannot come back to life. It is related to the law of progress and the law of destruction. But at that time, they didn't know. So every time someone did something to make a sick person wake up, that person was magic, was a sorcerer. And then we go to Jesus. But Jesus is a different situation. He's not like Elijah, that he a missionary that had mediumship. Jesus is the boss itself. So he could see much further away. So even in situations like Lazarus of lethargy, it's much harder for you to identify. He could see that the spirit was right there. His mediumship, as we learn from Spiritism, it's directly to God, so it's not a mediumship to another spirit. He doesn't need a bridge. He's connected straight to God, whatever that means to us. So he could see everything. You are approaching him, he could see everything. He could see your thoughts, he could see the images, the thing that you are obsessed about, the diseases, the virtues, flaws. And when he was called to see this man that was dead, he saw that he's not dead. He was already in his tomb. The guy was being buried already. And he saw, no, the spirit is right there. That's just an infirmity. But he cannot say that. He couldn't say that. Nobody would understand. He would just say, okay, get up, come in. And Lazarus got up. And then in Luke, it says that sometime later, they got together again. They had a meeting. They sat down and they ate together. So he was really fine. Lazarus was really fine. It was not just a spur of the moment. He was really back to life. So that is the first meaning and the most common meaning of resurrection, which we understand today. That is just people that were sick and weren't really dead. Then we have another meaning of resurrection that shows, I believe this one shows in all four Gospels, when Jesus came back. If we remember from the beginning, I said that Jesus is part of this pure spirits group that are responsible for life in the universe. And they met when the world were being formed. So then we understand, we start thinking, they met where? In Jesus' office, in the sun? So there's a company there that we don't know. Those guys, those spirits, they are not connected to matter anymore. So they don't need a chair, an office, a table. It's something that we cannot comprehend yet, in the same way that we cannot comprehend a different color. Think about a color that is not in the rainbow. We can't. Or think about another dimension. Draw a picture in 4 dimensions. We can't. We can't. In the same way that we cannot comprehend, but it is what it is. So when he came and he reincarnated between us, it was a huge effort because it's like a reincarnation in several levels. Because as we know, even when we discarnate, we still have our perispirit, and perispirit is made from matter from this planet. But he's no longer connected to this planet. So first, he had to surround himself from matter that is from this planet. Then he started thinking about getting a body that we could interact with. So it's a completely different process than our reincarnation. Something that is still out of our reach. So when he came back, it was already a huge effort for materialization. So he was still here. He just need to change it a little bit. His perispirit or his borrowed perispirit to show himself to Mary of Magdala, the first one who saw him. And then she saw him, and immediately what we do, we cannot see with our eyes, we have to touch. So she ran to hug him and said, "Oh, stop right there. Stop right there. I haven't gone to my father yet." So in my mind, it says, you have no idea how hard it is to be here materialized in front of you. So don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. Stay there. We can communicate this way. You're seeing me, I'm seeing you, we can communicate this way. And then he shows up several other times when the disciples were all together and Thomas were there and saying, I don't believe this, I don't believe that. We all know this story. And then Jesus, the doors were all closed. And then he shows right in the middle of them. Hello, how are you? And then he let Thomas, okay, touch here, touch here, touch here. So we know this as being materialization of the perispirit. He didn't have to go through the whole process of reincarnation again. So this meaning in this situation, resurrection means the materialization of the perispirit, and we see this again in several cultures. So he was not back in his material body, such that he would just show up in a few situations and then he would disappear again. And he didn't stay for long. He just showed himself in a few meetings, and then he went away. So my mission is done here. Just wanted to show you guys that death, it's not the end. So I'm coming back. So you saw me dying on the cross. So I'm telling you, this is what I have been telling you all about. Our kingdom, our life is there. It's not here. So that's why I came back. See? So that's what was his intent. And then he ascended. So then we have this mythology of ascension. It seems that we are so connected to our body that our reward for us is to go to heaven with our bodies. And we think that this is a reward. So we have Elijah. Elijah went to heaven in a chariot of fire. It could, why a chariot? So people still talk about the chariot. It could be a Tesla. Today he drove a Tesla. We use the technology that we knew at the time. So he went back to heaven with his body. Mary, the mother of Jesus, she went back to heaven with her body. Jesus went back to heaven with his body. Why would that be a good thing? So you still have to carry this? So okay, I'm shackled to this forever now? And we cannot forget that God created all laws. The moral laws that we study in Spiritism and the laws of physics. He created that too. It's not a different God. It's the same God. So how can you take a body and you just completely disregard gravity? So you can't, you shouldn't. It's the law of God. Why would he break his own law? So he didn't. This is just mythology. It's our way. It's in our head. That's the way that we understood. If I can't see, it's a Bible. And then we go to yet another meaning. So we use the word resurrection to explain several different meanings at that time. So here we have the prophet Isaiah and the prophet Malachi. So one from the 8th century BC and the other one from the 6th century BC. And both of them were talking about John the Baptist. So they were saying that there will be, this messenger will come to prepare the environment for Jesus' teachings. So he will come immediately before Jesus. And some of them would say, this messenger will be Elijah. So Elijah, that famous prophet that ascended to heaven, he will come back. He will come back in the body of John. So that was so common that people around at that time, they would ask Jesus, so is this John Elijah? So it was common for them that the concept of resurrection, but using what we understand as reincarnation, it was common for them. And Jesus says, I'm going to read just one paragraph on the Gospel according to Spiritism. So this is in Matthew, where Jesus says, now, since the time of John the Baptist was right there. So why since the time of John the Baptist? So he's referring to the previous incarnation of John. Until the present, the kingdom of heaven has been taken by violence, and violent are those who obtain it. For up until John, all the prophets and the law thus prophesied. And if you wish to understand, because up to that point, okay, why are you talking about it? John is right here. Why are you talking about since the time of John? Or since John to the prophets? And he says, if you wish to understand what I have said, he himself is Elijah who must come. Let him hear who has ears to hear. So you're saying, he is Elijah. He's right here. So this was very common, and this concept of reincarnation, it was substituted, it was replaced by another imposed concept on Western civilization. That is, it's comparing to the old traditions. This concept is modern and new. It's that we live only once. We live only once, and you are judged only once. And after this judgment, you spend all eternity in one side or the other, either in heaven or hell. So you can either receive eternal bliss or eternal damnation in one life. So I'm going to give you one chance, and I'm going to put all the obstacles in the way so that you don't reach your goal. And so that imposed fear on us, because it's like children. It's like, you don't want to obey me, so then I'm going to tell you some horror story that someone's going to come and pick you up if you don't obey. So it was the same thing with us. It was the same thing, something that we needed. So we needed more discipline and less understanding. But that time is over. So now is the time of understanding. And the reincarnation concept never really died. So there were people who continued studying it through Jewish culture, Kabbalah, or Egyptian, Greek, or even Oriental culture. Until our civilization was mature enough to overcome all the symbolisms around reincarnation, all those concepts of resurrection, and understand what it really means. And then comes the Spiritist doctrine. So it's not magic. It's not something, okay, so then from one day to the other, everything was clear to us. We could understand everything. No, it was very hard work. Very hard work. Everything. If you want a change to happen, it's not going to happen through magic. It's heavy work from all of us. It's a lot of work. So Kardec, he literally worked himself to this carnation. So he dedicated his life, he sacrificed his health so that we could have these books. So that we could have this clarification, this rationality that it is Spiritism. So it wasn't that easy. But when I say that when society was mature enough, it's not the majority. It's not the majority. If the majority of our world was completely mature to understand all those concepts, we would be in a much better place. We wouldn't be a world of expiation and tests and proofs. When I say that society was mature enough, it means that there were a group of people big enough so that when the idea comes, it creates very strong roots. Christianism was in a very small region of the world. It wasn't even the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was later, 300 years later. But the roots were strong. It never went away. It never went away. So the idea comes when there are opportunity for the roots to grow strong. And that's Spiritism. It's not the majority. If you read what is Spiritism? What is Spiritism? It's also a very important book. It's not here. It's not part of the books that we call the 5 basic books. But it's also a book written by Kardec, where he explains all the discussion that he had with several different people from society. And the battle was not a battle of muscles or blades or weapons. It's ideas. It's ideas. And then we can see how sharp he is and how reasonable he is in the discussion with all these members of society. And then we see that he was there to create a strong group, and he did. So we are here today, more than 150 years later. And it keeps growing, and keeps growing. But this doctrine, Spiritism, it brings another meaning for the word resurrection that we didn't know previously. And this meaning, it's in the book, or part of it, it's in the book Christianism and Spiritism from Leon Denis. So Leon Denis says, resurrection is the spiritual sense, resurrection in the spiritual sense is the rebirth of the spirit in the afterlife. The spiritualization of the human form for those who are worthy, not the chemical operation that rebuilds the material elements. It is the purification of the soul and its pure spirit. So he's talking about resurrection as purification. What does he mean? This is not related to anything that we saw so far. It's something else. And Spiritism is like, there are several pieces of the puzzle that we learn a little bit here, we learn a little bit there. So the answer to that, it comes in a book that is psychographed a long time later. That's called, because we needed to learn a little bit more. We needed to advance a little bit more so we could get another piece of the puzzle. So that's why the puzzle is spread throughout so many books, because we cannot get everything at once. We have to develop. So they wait for our science to develop, our intellect to develop, so they can give us another piece. So this other piece, it comes in the book Evolution in Two Worlds, where André Luiz comes back. Well, he comes, and then he describes all the intrinsic the development of our perispirit throughout our evolution. So it's a heavy book because he uses our science, biology, to explain what is happening. So then we can understand what is it that Leon Denis in 19th century wanted to say about this resurrection. So then I need to, in order to get to that concept, I have to explain some other little things first. So we have our perispirit, and we have this other thing here. Do you guys remember what this is? I know you do. So that's a cell. So that's a cell. Why is it that I'm putting a cell here and a perispirit there? André Luiz tells us that our perispirit, which is our body, says if you see someone that had discarnated, it looks just like when that person was incarnated. So it's us. We continue being ourselves. So our perispirit, it's formed by cells. Our perispirit is formed by cells. We still have our cells with us. But how can this be? How can we reason with that? What does that mean? If I'm saying that the perispirit is formed by cells, this means that I could see. You guys can see my cells here. So why is it that I cannot see? It's the same cells, but not the same matter. It's a different matter. So this means that even our cells, they have a spiritual counterpart. So this brings a degree of complexity to the process of discarnation and incarnation. So, when we discarnate, there's a process that is called histolysis. Histolysis. What is histolysis? Well, histo is tissue, and the rest means destruction. So every time we discarnate, our perispirit is reformed. It's not just, okay, detached and goes away. There is a process there. There is a process. Discarnation is a process where our perispirit takes everything that is good. So it reforms itself cell by cell on the other side through the process of histolysis. And necessarily, histolysis means destruction of something good, and then histogenesis takes that destruction and builds something else. So we go through the process of histology and histogenesis. When we incarnate, it's just histogenesis. Histo, again, tissue, genesis, beginning. So we create tissue. So when we incarnate, we have the egg, the zygote, and then it starts going through mitosis. Always 2 to the power of something. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. So it starts reproducing the cells, then goes to the phases of morula. I'm risking myself. I know. Morula, blastula. I remember my classes. And then through that process, so there's invagination, and then it starts creating the body, and then we have different types of cells that generate the nervous system, our organs. So that's all histogenesis. And each one of those cells, it's our perispirit connecting to those cells. So our perispirit is already there and is dictating this whole process. So if you have a bad kidney, some people say that I can blame genetics. I can blame my parents. When I do that, I'm blaming God. I'm always blaming God. But it's not God. We were already there. So if you have a bad kidney, it's because you had that in yourself. And when you form your body, that bad kidney is the reflection of who you are, of your imperfection, that you have to work on it. So it's always us. It starts and ends in us. We don't go around and blaming God or genetics and this and that. Genetics is the consequence, but it's the only thing that we can see so far. So then we go through this process, histogenesis when we incarnate, and when we start the process of discarnation, that could be very fast, or it could take a decade. You see a person that is sick, and you see the person is losing volume, is shrinking, and all you see is the histolysis. It's the destruction of the tissue. But you don't see the histogenesis of the perispirit on the other side. But there's one very, very important detail in all that. Animals, they cannot do that. They can't. This is something that we acquired through our evolution. When we were animals, when we were in those smaller kingdoms, vegetables, mineral, we could not do that. Because this histogenesis needs control. So we need the conscience that we are who we are. We train that every time we go to sleep. We detach from our body, and you still are yourself. But because I know I am a man, I know that I have 2 legs and 2 arms, so I form those 2 arms and just those 2 legs. I form the shape of my face, I form my body. But you need to be conscious of who you are. That's why animals, they need help for that, for this histology and histogenesis. So when we put all this together, we see that discarnation is actually the resurrection of the perispirit. We resurrect every time we discarnate. It's a process of purification. We are purifying ourselves. So our body, it's taking everything that is good, obeying the mental field that we have. All your addiction, all your obsessions, the images that you form in you, the thought forms, your virtues, your flaws, all this, it's around you all the time, and it shapes the atmosphere that you walk on. And when you start the process of discarnation, when your body is destroyed by histolysis, that's why once a person is dead, he cannot resurrect back to life. I told you that I would explain, because of histolysis, the cell is not there anymore, so it cannot come back and form a material body. So that's why Jesus did not resurrect in his body, Elijah didn't. So it's all materialization of the perispirit. So when we are in that process of histolysis, our perispirit, it has its chance to reform anew on the other side, but it can only be purified, we can only purify ourselves if our thought is constructive. If everything is based on what we are thinking. If you discarnate and you're still thinking on your addiction, whatever it is, that's going to go with you. You're going to have that with you. If you discarnate and you carry that hate in you, if you carry hate, that is going to create an unbalanced, deformed perispirit on the other side. Because the perispirit reforms cell by cell on the other side. Can you guys see this? Is it too complex? So this is there in the book Evolution in Two Worlds. And many, many other things. See, André Luiz compares us with the caterpillar turning into a butterfly. So the caterpillar, it goes through the process of histolysis, destroys her body to form the new body with the wings. And if we go there and we see that cocoon moving, and we want to see the butterfly, and we go there with the X-Acto knife and we cut that cocoon. Because we want to free the butterfly, right? We want to help the butterfly. And we go there and cut. The process is not complete yet. So then something malformed will fall on the ground and be eaten by predators. So we have to wait its course. What I'm talking about here, suicide. We have to wait its course. We can't, the process is not up to us. Up to us, it's what will be the mental field that we have, we're going to have at the moment of discarnation. But the time, that moment is not decided by us. So it doesn't matter how hard life is. It has to run its course. It doesn't matter. It has to run its course. Otherwise, our wings will not be well formed on the other side. And all this talk, we can connect this with something else. Okay, so we're talking about resurrection. So our life here is an opportunity for resurrection. Every life, every time we reincarnate, we are getting an opportunity for resurrection. What about, so can we extrapolate this and think about our world? Can a world be resurrected? Of course. Resurrection, it's a word that comprises two main laws, the law of destruction and the law of progress. Normally, for something to be resurrected anew, we have to scramble a little bit. We have to shake the base. We have to relearn. We have to do things in a new way. So that's with us, and that is with our world. So there is one, I still have time. So there is one sentence from the book that I mentioned already, On the Way to the Light, where Emmanuel, this time, he talks a little about the situation where we are going through right now. So he says, "For after the darkness, a new dawn shall appear. Consoling light will envelop the entire orb that has been regenerated in the baptism of suffering. The spiritual human being will be melded with the physical one for the glorious march towards the unlimited. And Spiritism, having taken from the world's material ruins the divine soul of all religions perverted by humans, will connect them with the welcome embrace of restored Christianity." Then he continues, "In looking back on the scene of world history, we feel a cold shiver at the sight of this dolorous twilight of Western civilization. Let us remember the Father's mercy and pray. The night time will not be long in coming, and in the belly of its deep darkness, let us not forget Jesus, whose infinite mercy will be, as always, the immortal light of the future dawn of peace." So he talks about the twilight and the dawn. The dawn of peace, fraternity, and redemption. This was written in 1938, right after this. Germany invaded Poland and Second World War started. Even though First World War, which was the worst thing that had ever happened to Western civilization in history, had ended only 20 years ago. So I'm talking, if we were 2020, 2000, the year 2000. We still have very fresh memories of everything that happened in the 2000s, right? So they had very fresh memory of First World War. And they still pride spoke louder, and they started another. So this was the night time that Emmanuel was talking about. So when we see today, we are in the histolysis of our world. Everything, it's shaken. We see anxiety, we see people losing what it is the meaning of being alive. And then they deliver themselves to chemicals to make them happy. Some of these chemicals, some of these drugs are accepted in society, some are not. But the root is the same. It's the lack of meaning. Why can't we be happy sitting down talking and drinking juice or water? Why do we have to change our conscience? So we have to numb our memory to be happy, and this is accepted and is laughed upon. So the person is falling in the corner, cannot talk, cannot walk, and everybody's laughing. Oh, he's having a good time. Really? Is that a good time? Is that strength? So we are in this night time. So we are in the histolysis of our world. But we need to remember that there's a purpose for that. We need, who is guiding this ship? So we see global warming, we see polar caps melting, we see another mass extinction of species, or how many species we have extinct ourselves, the humans. And we see all that, and oh my God, well, where is this going? Don't despair. Don't despair. Because who is guiding this ship? It's God. And who is working for God? Jesus. It's not their first rodeo. It's not their first time. They know what they're doing. They know that first has to come this histolysis, has to come this destruction or the shaking of the basis of society, so that we can understand that that's not enough. Life for the pleasures of the flesh, it's not enough. It is not enough. When we are tired of all that, then we start looking to the light. Then we start looking for places who provide this spiritual life, who provide this, who can quench our thirst that we don't even know we have. So what I'm trying to say is that after the nighttime, the light will come. So we can go through this process. We see aggressive people, we see depressed people, we see addiction that is off the charts. Suicide is off the charts. What do we do? How do we change this world? We always ask ourselves, what is the world that I want to live in? Okay, so be the first one to live in that world. What does that mean? Poetry. I mean, when you're talking to your friend, when you're driving your car, when you're dealing with your colleagues at work, when you're dealing with strangers, remember that. What world do I want to live in? And then be that world. Be nice. Be forgiven. Try to understand why, if someone tells me something bad, why do I feel that need to say something bad back? Stop for a while and think, what is the psychological trigger that I have in me? Why do I have that? Why is this here? We know that it's not going to work. Nothing good will come out of it. Nothing good. If aggressiveness were good, all the wars that we went through would have purified our world. It never changed. It doesn't change. It's one war after the other. Finally, now we are afraid enough, after everything we've seen, we are afraid enough. And when someone talks about war, everybody tries to, okay, no, but we went there already. We went there so many times. Because we are the same spirits, right? Just different reincarnations. So we've seen uncountable wars. So then we remember that, at least in our subconscious. And we don't want a new war. But that's more fear than understanding. So let's try to study ourselves. What I mean is, we cannot change from one day to the next. But we can start the struggle. So just join the struggle. Struggle with yourself to be a better person. So it's the histolysis process, so that the histogenesis can happen. So that we can build. And this process is ongoing, and we are part of it. So what I want to say is that our life, it's an opportunity for resurrection. Not just our own resurrection, but the resurrection of our world. So let's remember that and work for our resurrection, the resurrection of those who surround us, and the resurrection of our planet, our home. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael, for a very deep and complex lecture, but very good. Very. So, have any questions, any comments? Luciana, anything on the internet? No. Yeah, I think it's quite deep. To me, it was good. It's good to see a little more depth and a new meaning for resurrection, because Evolution into World is a book from Andrews that I cannot read. I read all his books. I read the first chapter and I gave up. So to me, it's really nice to have this new concept of a resurrection, as a reincarnation almost. We always remember reincarnation coming here, but we never see as a reincarnation going back to the spiritual world. So to me, that was a new concept on the terms of a resurrection or reincarnation that I never thought about because I cannot never read the book. It's too much.
It has to be little by little. You
Yeah.
read one chapter and then you go to the internet. Okay, what he doesn't mean by this, and that, and then you wait and then you read another one. Go little by little.
Actually, after this lecture, I almost feel like trying again, trying to look again.
It's a good book, and now it's in Amazon. It's in English, so you can read in English. It's available on Amazon.
So thank you very much for your lecture.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you everyone, all of you that were with us over the internet. We're hoping to see you back here next Sunday. And for the rest of the group, we're going to now prepare for the passes. Okay.